Welcome everyone to Deep Drinks Podcast. It's really good to be here today. It's really an exciting episode we got coming up. So today we are talking about something quite controversial. We're looking at God's father. We're made in the image of God, right? Did God have a family? He has a son. Like, let's look at this. This is going to be interesting. We have some Bible scriptures as well. We're also going to be looking at hell and comparative mythology with my guest today, Jacob Berman of the History Valley YouTube channel. He's the creator and host where he does conversations quite similar to this, but I'd say more academic, more, how can I say, well thought out than I guess my Australian rambling ass does. But with that said, welcome Jacob Berman to Deep Drinks Podcast. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm really excited for this one because this is a conversation that happened when I was on your show just recently. I think we ended the conversation and then I started asking questions about you and off air, and then you started talking about your story and how you discovered some of these things, and I was like, wait, what? I've heard Dan McClellan talk about this, but this is interesting. But before we jump into it, as always, what are we drinking today?
I got my Coke bottle right here.
Oh yeah, and you know what? We're cost of living crisis in Australia, so I've got my cheap version of cola, the home brand sugar-free version. So it's just as good, does the same thing. So yeah, we're cracking off with some Coke today, which is nice to finally not be drunk in the middle of the day. So. Can I just ask you firstly, for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and like who you are as a person? Who is Jacob?
Sure. Yeah, my research started around like 2013, 2014, when I was going through the Torah, and I came across a couple verses in Deuteronomy, and it was about God apparently inheriting Israel from another god, and I became very curious about that. And I've pretty much been practically always an atheist for the most part. Well, not just for the most part, but pretty much. I never really bought into religion, but then of course there was a lot of people out there, and I was like, oh, you should believe because you could go to hell. Right, it's better to believe. That's something we hear all the time, right? It's better to believe so you don't risk going to hell.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, what's the harm in believing anyway, right?
Actually, sorry to already interject. That's what I like to do, by the way. I'm apologize, but that's already a weird thing, a weird framing, isn't it? Like you're choosing to believe. You know what I mean? Like, isn't belief like you're convinced of something or you're not convinced of something? It's not like it's not for like barragging for a football team or a soccer team or something. It's a sports team. It's are you convinced of it or not? So yeah, that's interesting.
Right, and one of the frequent responses against it is that, well, how do you know you're not going to go to someone else's hell, right? Because other religions have hells too. How do you know you're not going to go there to their hell or to someone else's punishment? Like how do you know? So it's kind of the same problem for them too. But and obviously the idea is very scary, and I was very afraid of the idea. I'm like, okay, well, I want to really look into this. I'm like, does it make sense? But it didn't really make sense to me. And then I come across this exactly as I mentioned earlier. I came across Deuteronomy 32 verse 8 to 9, which is really what got the ball rolling for me. It's like, okay,
well,
you're telling me God. Go ahead.
Well, can I just ask? Sorry, why were you reading the Bible in the first place instead of I don't know, playing Halo or something or why did you have any interest in reading the Bible?
Well, because I was told a lot about the Bible when I grew up, and I wanted to look into it, and I wanted to learn about it. I wanted to learn why people believe it, why people take it seriously. why do a lot of people believe in this? Several people that I've met believe in this. So it was more of a curiosity. And why do people believe in this? Why do they fear it in a way? Because a lot of people say they believe in it out of fear, but God loves them too. That's kind of weird. God loves you, but is threatening you with hellfire, supposedly, if you don't believe. So that's kind of a weird relationship. It's like a love-hate relationship going on there. But it's more like it's not really that. It's more like it's a threat. You're being threatened into worshiping this deity. That's how it feels like. So I'm like, okay, well, this is obviously wrong. And so when I started looking into this myself, the way I approached it is not just from the perspective of other people have hells, other religions have punishments, and how do you know you're not going to go to someone else's hell versus the Christian hell, but the fact that the biblical God has a father. When you read Deuteronomy 32 verse 8 to 9, I'm going to pull up a slide in a moment here. But the fact that God has a father, it gave me the impression like this is making me take this even less seriously than I already. I was already not taking it seriously as it is, but this is it's like, to me, it's like, this is absurd. So I'm supposed to believe that God is the only God. But it turns out that the same book is saying that, he inherited from the Most High God. So I wanted to investigate this. Who is this Most High God? Because often they tell you God is the Most High. So what are you talking about? What do you mean God is the son of the Most High? He can't be the son of the Most High. But that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, when you start looking into it, you start realizing that the Most High and Yahweh, or Adonai, whatever you want to call them, were originally separate beings. They were not originally the same being, and there's a lot of scholarship done on this that originally in early Judaism, he was originally understood as a son of the Most High God, El Elyon, or Ha El Elyon, the Most High God. And the text experienced some changes over time, which is something I'm going to get into right now. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this the slide. All right, here it is.
It's so interesting because we regularly do, like, not deconstruction. Well, we regularly do deconstruction stories, but we do people's stories, and it's just so funny that this is actually part of your story, is finding this verse, but it's also the more meaty part of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll bring up this is your slides, and
yes,
I got my handy Bible here too, so I can look up the same references.
Yeah, so what it says is, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of men, he fixed the bounds of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. So you see that right there. Heritage, he inherits. So he's inheriting. The Lord, Adonai, Yahweh, Hashem, whatever we want to call him, is inheriting from Ha El Elyon, the Most High God. Now this matches what we see. This translation is based on 4QDJ, which is the version right on the top. That's a Dead Sea Scroll. So I just read that, and the one that's there is pretty much the same, so I'm not going to read it again. But when we see the Septuagint version, which pretty much reads the same, but it says angels of God instead. And then when you get to the JPS Tanakh, which is based on the Masoretic text, you see children of Israel instead. So there's been some changes done here.
Okay, can I pause?
Yeah.
Because I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is. So I always say that and then tell everyone, by the way, that's a Forrest Gump reference. Sorry, I'm laughing at my own weirdness. Hey everyone, I'm back. No, can you give us a bit of a breakdown? Because when I was a
Sure, yeah.
Christian, my understanding was we had manuscripts of like the originals of like when, and I'll just bring the slide down for now,
Right.
for a second.
Sure.
We had
That's
these originals manuscripts, and then that's what we translated directly into English. But obviously, since then, I've learned that the Bible is, a lot of the Bible is written from mismatched different documents from all over that all are saying to be the same document. So, can you explain what you mean by the different codices that you have there, and what you're saying?
So this would be like a process of redaction. So what you see in the Septuagint is closer to the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and scholars would say that and it's very complicated. There's a lot going on here. This is kind of a you could call it textual criticism. So when
Mm-hmm.
you look at the Septuagint, you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, you look at the differences, because there are differences,
So,
and there are more differences than I can get into tonight. There's quite a lot. Well, not a lot, but there are some. There are some
yeah.
differences.
But what is the Septuagint compared to the Dead Sea Scrolls? Because we found the Dead Sea Scrolls
Yes.
like 50 years ago. So before we had the Dead Sea Scrolls, was the Septuagint the earliest version of Deuteronomy that we had?
Well, let me explain the origin of the Septuagint. So the Septuagint started out originally as a translation of the Torah, 5 books,
Okay.
the first 5 books of the Tanakh, and this happened in the 3rd century BCE. It's a translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look into the history of the scholarship done on the Septuagint, because it said angels of God, it was hypothesized, this is before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, that the original probably said sons of God, B'nai Elohim. That's basically what they were saying. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And it said it, pretty much. I was like, oh, we were right. We were
And
right.
the Dead Sea Scrolls are earlier than the Septuagint?
Not all of them. Most of them are later. Some of them probably around the time. And I think maybe a couple of them are earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I don't exactly have that information in front of me right
Yeah.
now. So I'll just end it out there. But what I'll say is scholars would basically say that the Dead Sea Scrolls are going to get us as close as we're going to get to an earlier version of the Hebrew Bible before it was translated into the Greek.
Yeah. Okay.
And what I just showed earlier is an example of how the Septuagint is at times closer. Yeah, there it is, to the LXX. That's a Septuagint, everybody. So the Septuagint, which is the middle version in the screen there, is closer to the original, or closer to what's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, than the Masoretic version that we see in the bottom.
Mm.
And there are other examples like this too. And so when you look into this, you'll see what I'm talking about. And there's a lot of scholarship that's been done on this. And I think it's obvious why it's been changed. Why do they change it to children of Israel? What does it? Well, I think it's quite clear what it does. You don't want to imply there are other powers, right?
No.
You don't want to do that. You got to get
No.
rid of that. Even putting angels of God there is a problem, because if you got God inheriting from another God, then you're kind of equating God with the angels of God too, that are given other nations, respectively. So that's a
Yeah.
little bit of a problem. You can't have that. So you got to change it to children of Israel. And when you change it to children of Israel, you change the context. And so all of a sudden, and this is what they'll say often today, oh, you see, he's inheriting from himself. God gave him self. Israel. That's how they put it.
Yeah,
That doesn't make
it's
any
like
sense.
it's like when Cameron Bertuzzi tells me that when God is resting on the eighth day, that he's still all powerful and he didn't need to rest, but he's just resting because I don't know. Yeah, it's like he's resting for no reason, but
yeah,
because he's all powerful. Yeah,
and to that end, the so-called all-powerful God gets defeated by iron chariots and judges. So how does that work? Yeah,
yeah. This is we'll get into that. So, so what I've discovered through talking to people like yourself, to Dr. Kip, to Dr. Matt Monga, to all the guys, right, all the scholars and stuff, is that the Bible seems to be originally a mismatch of a lot of different ideas that are kind of worked and massaged into the text. So you get these like holdovers of things that don't seem to make sense with later theologies, but they made sense maybe at the time, or certain beliefs are adopted. So, for example, I think Dr. Dan McClellan was saying when he came on Deep Drinks that that El was a Canaanite deity. I think it was El. I could be getting this wrong. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's El.
Yeah, El was a Canaanite deity that likely got adopted into the pantheon of and became El Shaddai, which the Most High. Oh, is El Shaddai the Most High? But became
El Elion's the Most High.
El
Shaddai is God Almighty. Yeah,
yeah.
All right. Yeah,
they got like brought into the same like pantheon and became part of the pantheon of Israel, which is another interesting thing because in parts of the Bible too, you see that it's clear that there are other gods. Have no other gods but me. But if I talk to a Christian today, they're like, no, there is only one God. Right. But it's like the Bible doesn't even say that. Like maybe like that gets massaged again into the text later on, but there's a lot of different voices and there's no one idea, and that's why in Christianity you have 45,000 denominations, according to the Center of Christian Studies, I think it is.
And if there is no other God, how could God get jealous? Because you read the commandments, right? And God says, "I'm a jealous God." What is there to be jealous about?
Especially, exactly. I never thought about that, because why would he be jealous of people? It'd have to be something on his level, right?
Right. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, interesting. That's interesting. That's like if my friend got a promotion at work, I might be jealous. Like someone might be jealous of a friend. But if my dog got promoted in puppy school, I'm just going to be stoked. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm jealous.
There you go. That's a good analogy. Yeah. Right.
Except God is obviously all powerful, so he's infinitely greater. The gap is infinitely greater. So there's another verse that you had that kind of also points in this direction, that God maybe had a father, and that's like a holdover from old ideas.
Well, I'm not sure if this is the one you meant, but in this one, it talks about God appearing in the divine council, taking his place in the divine council. And then when you work your way down, it says, I say ye are gods. So I say you are gods, children of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, you shall die like mortals and fall like any prince. Rise up, O judge. I was like, rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations belong to you. So what you got here is like, okay, you got gods, children of the Most High. That part would be consistent with what we saw earlier. You've got sons of God. And those sons of God, each one of those sons of God, are being given a different nation to control. And the Lord, who is one of those many gods, is being given Israel as his territory to control. So a divine council here in Psalms makes sense. But we also see something else, I think, that's going on here. Notice it gets a little polemical there. You see some polemic. It says, "You shall die like mortals and fall like any prince." So I think here we could be seeing some evidence here. I think we're seeing some evidence here that this is where this text was either written around or maybe a little later, but around the time that we're moving away from caring about those other gods. We got to get rid of them. We gotta promote the Lord as the only God. We gotta promote Yahweh as the God. That's what they gotta. So what we saw earlier is evidence of henotheism. I would say that okay, they're worshiping one God while not necessarily denying the existence of other gods. So they weren't monotheistic yet. Because monotheism was like, okay, there is absolutely no other gods. There's no room for any other gods. There's only one. So that would be like the next step, I would say.
Yeah.
So now let's take a look at the next one. Okay, so this is a big one right here that we need to look at. 2 Kings 5:16, 18. I'm going to read the whole thing. But he said, "As the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will accept nothing." He urged him to accept, but he refused. Then Naaman said, "If not, please let 2 mule loads of earth be given to your servant. For your servant will no longer offer burnt offerings, will no longer offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god except the Lord. But may the Lord pardon your servant on one count. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow down in the house of Rimmon. When I do bow down in the house of Rimmon, may the Lord pardon your servant on this one count." Okay, so Naaman is taking 2 mule loads of earth so he can bring Israel with him as it goes into another deity's territory. You see how that's interesting there? So Naaman is not under the impression there's only one God. He can't be. What else is he? Why is he doing this? Why is he going for the trouble of bringing 2 mule loads of earth with him?
Because he's
yeah. He knows there's a problem. There's a problem.
Well,
yeah.
This is also another thing that's kind of blown my mind in my whole process of re-examining the Bible with an academic, critical kind of, not academic, but critical lens.
Yeah.
Is that you forget that I was taught the Bible through the lens of the New Testament, through the lens of Jesus. I was taught the Hebrew Bible, and so you read Jesus into everything, but Jesus, he isn't there. Unless you want him to be there. And one of the things that I found incredibly interesting is, you know how you go to there'll be some like certain tribes or island kind of religions that will have their gods as like literal like physical ornaments. They'll have like, this is I think when Captain Cook, the bloke that discovered Australia, when they were disgusted at the idea of it might not be Captain Cook, but they discovered the idea that like when they're getting taught Christianity, where is your God? Like, we can hold our God. Where's your God? Like, show us your God. Right. And I find it interesting because I was like, wow, that's such a primitive idea of a God. Like, that's so like, obviously God's not there. God's up in the sky or something. Like, is the mythology that I was taught. But what's interesting is the Old Testament clearly like makes out, well, first of all, there are times when God is there as like a physical being, but then he's a temple deity. He's literally a temple deity. He resides within the temple, and like that, and that was what was so symbolic about the curtain splitting when Jesus supposedly died on the cross. Because he was a temple deity. So it wasn't like he wasn't up in heaven. This is what, like, I went through ministry college and I was even taught this, like, that he was the God dwelled within the most holy place. But it never clicked that he was like like that, like he was a temple deity. Like it never clicked that he was like part of this, like he was actually in there. Like that was confusing to me. Yeah.
And when you think about it, the fact that he was originally the son of a different deity makes sense of that. He has a body.
Yeah.
The other sons of God have bodies too. And in Exodus at one point, it says that the Lord is a man of war. And Judges, he's right there in battle next to Judah. They lose to iron chariots, apparently. And
can we read that?
Yeah, so Judges 1:19.
I'll pull open my trusty trusty Bible. It's gonna take me ages to find it, isn't it? Judges 1:18.
1:19.
1:19.
Yeah.
So this is a classic. This is a classic of atheist talking points. I think there was even a website called Iron Chariots, which documented all the.
I remember it. Yeah.
Was that Matt Dillahunty's website? Like he created that. It was like a wiki. It was like a wiki or something. I don't know. So Judges 1:19. The Lord was with the men of Judah. They took possession of the hill country, but they were unable to drive the people from the plains because they had iron chariots.
Yeah.
The Lord is with them, but they could not do something because they had iron chariots.
That's right.
And to us, that sounds absolutely nonsensical.
Right.
Maybe in the context at the time, they were just saying, our God's better than your God. Or your God's like, our God's with us and your God's with you. And
some try to get around this by saying, well, God was with Judah, but he wasn't really there. I'm like, then how can he be with him then? You see.
Again, it's taking the idea of we have about God now and injecting it back into the Old Testament. I had an argument with someone recently on Twitter. Again, I should stop arguing with people on Twitter, but I can't help myself. But I noticed you didn't have a Twitter, by the way. I tried to tag you, and I was like, "Wow,
actually, I do.
Smart man."
Actually,
you do?
I do, but I don't use it very often.
Oh, very smart. Like it's honestly, it's gotten so much worse too lately. But but one of the things is they were saying like God is spirit, doesn't have a body. And I said, well, how did God walk with Adam and Eve in the garden? What did that mean?
There you go.
So like we have this, like I actually went through a bit of the Bible a couple of nights ago in preparation for this. And I was looking at it as like, you have a God that walks in the garden. You have a God that hides his face. You have a God that, to Moses, he speaks from his mouth. He sits on a throne, and also like, and this is something that's super interesting as well. And this is what makes me think that maybe God was made in our image and we're not made in his image. I think it was the other way around, is because God also gets angry, he feels jealousy, he gets depressed, he worries. God worries. How can you know everything and worry like that? When I worry, it's like, what if this? He worries. He feels hatred and love. He feels happiness, and he thinks about things. So, like Isaiah 55:8, he is literally thinking about things. He like ponders things. He's trying to, and to me, this just screams humans creating what they think. Humans creating an idea of God. And this whole idea of like, well, then of course God has a father. If we're made in his image, of course he has a family. Why would he create us in his image and then just like, but you're going to be operating in a completely different system. You're going to have a partner, and this all goes into it. I know we didn't prepare to talk about this, but there is a lot of people who talk about Asherah, God's wife.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That is, a whole other like conversation, but do you know anything about Asherah?
Yeah, she's like the mother of about 70 children of El. And and it does correspond to the 70 or some others will put it 72. But this is similar to the Table of Nations. It's like 70 nations. Yeah. And so I don't think that's a coincidence. So you got each son of El being given a nation. One of those sons of El is, of course, Yahweh, the Lord. So that's what it looks like to me.
Excuse me, Ashra was hot apparently. Vishanti had a really good question. Where in the Bible specifically are you getting the idea of an omni-god, like a one god? That seems to be the root of some of your critiques. Christianity, that's where I get it from. Christianity. It's not from the Bible, it's from Christianity, and it's from what I was taught. And it's what apologists are still teaching, that there is one God and every other god is not a real god. It's like an idol or something. But yeah, it's not from the Bible. It's not from a critical thought process. It's but it's still what gets taught by a lot of people today. That's still what people talk about.
Yeah.
Do you have any more slides on the God's Father?
Let's get to the next one. All right. So
I love this, by the way.
Yeah, 1 Samuel 26:19. Now, therefore, let my Lord, the king, hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering. But if it is mortals, may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out today from my share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. So look at this right here. So you've got someone complaining. This is about David and Saul. So David's fleeing. Saul's trying to hunt down David. And so what's going on here is that it's like, okay, you're going to force me to go into someone else's territory outside of the Lord's heritage. You see? So I'm like, wait a minute now. Hold on a minute. Because we're supposed to believe these people were always monotheists, right? Then how do we explain this? You've got this guy saying, you're going to force me into another territory and serve other gods outside of the heritage of the Lord. How do we explain this? Well, I can explain it because it fits perfectly with Deuteronomy 32. Perfectly. It's consistent with that. You see, the Lord inherited Israel from another God. And so, of course, this would be an issue if you go step foot in the territory of another deity. So, there you go. The heritage, once again. Yeah.
It's so interesting. I want to ask you, do you have any more how many more slides do you have, or do you have any more slides? I just want to check.
That's the end of it.
Good, because I wanted to actually ask you, I'm not good, not as in like good, it's great, it was awesome presentation, but I wanted to ask you, when you found this, did you go straight to Frank Turek's YouTube channel and try and find an answer, or what are the apologists saying to this?
I did not take apologetic websites seriously then, and even before that, and I already knew they're not going to have an answer for this. Didn't even bother. It wasn't even really a thought. I'm like, pointless. This. I really don't think there's any way to run from this. It's very clear. It's not ambiguous. It's not hard to understand. He's inheriting from another god. Why was David afraid of he was forced outside of Israel because of his conflict with Saul? He had to worship other deities. You got the two the 2 mules or something like that, or whatever, the 2 cartloads of Israelite soil. Yeah, mules carrying Israelite soil. I mean, come on. It's
Mm.
it's all a part. It's all a part of the heritage scenario.
Mm.
All connected with that.
So it seems quite clear cut, but also these are a lot of people who somehow twist Jesus, like explicitly saying this generation will not pass away until all these things happen. They somehow try and get that to work, and they convince a lot of people. So have you looked at any, like, what are some good critiques against this? Have you looked at any critiques that actually have that you've gone, maybe that does work, or
I haven't found any other interpretation convincing. When Jesus says that the return is supposed to happen, it's going to happen within their lifetime. So clearly, some of them are supposed to be alive still when the return is to come, the second coming. So how is that supposed to work? I mean, they're not going to be living 2,000 years later or later than that if we're supposed to think that it's supposed to happen in the future. That doesn't make any sense. That's nonsense.
I've spent countless hours on a video on this very subject. It's not out yet. You can check out the draft on Patreon, but it's I went deep into the excuses that apologists are using, and it's just incredible. But regarding the God's father or God's heritage question, have you looked at any, like, scholars that maybe, I've respected, not like the Frank Turek's of the world, sorry, Frank, but like, critical scholars who maybe have a different interpretation? Have you found anything like that?
There are some that do, and I looked into that a little bit way back then, but I did not find those answers convincing. A lot of scholars are very convinced, and for very logical and obvious reasons, that obviously Yahweh was originally El's son, and even after the Masoretic redaction occurred, the idea of God having a heritage obviously slipped in several places, as I've shown some of that earlier in the slides. So not all of it was redacted out. So, I mean, I don't see how anyone can try to get around that. The two mules carrying soil to bring it to have some kind of mobile Israel into another country, so that way you don't have to worship another deity. And you got David being afraid of stepping foot outside of the heritage. Okay, you're not you don't inherit from yourself. That doesn't make any sense. Like,
a lot of this, I think, gets swept under the rug for a lot of Christians and people, is they just say it was different back then. It was the Old Testament. It was weird. It was a wacky time. It was Old Testament God where he took his belt off and belted his children. Like, it was it was different. Yeah. But when you really think about it, like, I mean, look at it through a historical lens, which is what you do on your channel, that it becomes incredibly more interesting, in my opinion. And it's like this was the problem I had with when I was deconstructing my faith. I was looking at the theory of evolution and creationism, and I was trying to make sense of it all. And what really bothered me is, at some stage, the questions that hadn't been answered yet in evolution, well, not even in evolution, but like where did we come from? Like, how did abiogenesis happen? There's like a really interesting conversation there. There's like, okay, there's the there's a type of a hypothesis that has been kind of debunked, but it actually works in a lab. They can actually work it, but they don't think that's the actual hypothesis. But there's all these different realms of things that you can research and be interested in. and read up on and study, and like you could spend ages just looking into that question, and there's lots of research. But when you get to a question that doesn't make sense for God or the Bible or creationism, the answer is just God did it. Or we can ask him when we meet him. We can ask why he did that when we meet him, or his ways are above our ways. And it's like, oh, this is boring. Like that's such a boring answer. Like why? Like
Tell me
it
about it.
just shuts down. It's like, okay, well, if your answer is God did it, then I'm gonna look at the information on the other side to understand what at least what they're saying. I don't agree with it, and
Right.
then I end up agreeing with it.
Another
So
thing they. Oh, were you finishing your thought there?
no. Sorry. Yeah, go.
Oh, no, that's fine. One of the things that some of them try to do to get around God's inheritance, they'll say, actually, that's proof of the Trinity. I'm like, oh, whoa, this is really absurd. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that God inherits from himself because, okay, he's his own father, just as Jesus is supposedly God now. So now he's his own father too. So that's the logic here. You gotta put that in the Hebrew Bible. You gotta reinterpret the Hebrew Bible in a Christian lens. Don't you see? I'm like, no. Let's start
and
with
it's
the
like,
fact Judaism doesn't have a Trinity. So this is a Christological reinterpretation of the Hebrew Bible that's massively anachronistic, incorrect, absurd. The Trinity is not the answer. It just makes it worse. Now it's oxymoronic, self-contradictory. It makes no sense. No.
There's also like there's something that and this ties greatly into our next talking point, but
Yeah.
one thing that Judaism doesn't have is hell, right? I learned that on the Big Bang Theory.
But not hell.
Yeah.
No.
And I was like, whoa. Like, I think Howard
Yeah.
says Jews don't have hell. And I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Well, but they have the Bible. It's all in the Bible. And then I went looking in the Bible, and it's not really in the Bible except for the New Testament. So
Right.
yeah, so you actually had a great fear of hell. You're telling me. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you kind of learned more about hell and where you're at with that?
Yeah, it was more like I was like, I want to thoroughly, I guess, prove to myself, like, okay, that I don't need to worry about hell. It's like I need to make sure, I need to look into it, look into the claim, and when I realized that God has a father, that was a big moment for me, and I'm like, it just wiped the slate clean for me right there. I'm like, I was not considering it anymore. That just went out of my mind permanently. Okay. How can I take their claim seriously when their own book says that God is a father? Forget hell, forget all that other stuff. This is ridiculous. Your own book says God has a father. So your monotheism is false. It's false. In your own book. Literally.
So if well, just to try and push back a little bit on that,
Sure.
is when you say, could it be possible that there, like, polytheism is true, but God Yahweh is the the God of the Bible is the Most High, the God of Israel is the Most High? Could that still be possible that there are other gods, but they're just lesser gods?
No, no. What I'm saying is that God is the son of El Elyon. So he is the son of the Most High. So in this case, they were originally separate. And yeah, I mean, there are other times it's combined. Yeah. There are times it's combined. And that may give the impression that they're the same God, even though they're not. It's just the title is transferred to El Son, the Lord or Yahweh, because now They're trying to make Yahweh a bigger God, a supreme God, and then eventually the only God. So that's the general idea.
Yeah. So, but so it was seeing the very human element of the story that made you realize that, well, if there's a human element here in like the very
Yeah.
nature of who God is, that means that I don't need to worry about these other ideas of hell that kind of developed later in the New Testament. And Exy Music said Zoroastrian origins, and I think that that's correct, isn't it? There's the origins of hell are probably influenced from Zoroastrianism and some Platonic Greek thought, maybe. Someone in the chat can maybe
yeah.
mention
That's not something I was planning on discussing, but I think that from the looks of it, it could be, but I have to look into the Zoroastrian parallels again. I haven't looked into that in some time. So I'm not exactly. That's not exactly on my mind tonight.
Yeah,
But yeah, hell is clearly, it has its origins outside of Judaism. It's not a thing in Judaism. So that would be about right.
So are you like, have you overcome your fear? Like, did you overcome it like straight away?
It's gone. Not even. I'm not concerned with it at all.
Yeah. I said this on your channel, I think, about like the idea of hell is kind of it's become like interesting to me in like a video game sense. Like, oh, I wonder what the different ideas. Like, I've got this book up there. I haven't started it yet, called Atlas of the Devil, and I think it's all the different ideas of hell and the afterlife and the devil. And it's interesting to me to think about that. There's all these different perspectives of where you end up after you die, or where your consciousness goes. And I just find it really fascinating. Like, what if hell was real? That would be kind of incredible. Like, and I actually find more interest in it than I am fear or anything. So yeah, it's so after that happened, do you have people like come onto your channel that still deal with the fear of hell, or still are going through the fear of hell at all?
Well, I haven't really asked that question, and I think it's more like I interview scholars that are atheists and scholars that are believers, and it's and I would assume that the believers believe in a hell of some kind that exists, but it's not something that so far hasn't really come up. But it's an interesting question, but it's not something that's really been discussed so far. The origins of hell. I mean, yeah, but not specifically in that way.
I'm thinking about because it was so fun. On my other channel, I did a hellcast where we had a bunch of people who had deconstructed their fear of hell, or were deconstructing, or still had fears of hell, but we talked about hell for a while, and it was really good. And I thought you could do something similar for Deep Drinks if anyone is would be interested in that. Let us know in the comments, because I think it was really fun to talk about hell, because there are a lot of people who still struggle with that fear even after they don't believe it anymore, which is super strange. Not strange for them, but I mean strange that the human psyche does that. Like, I think that if I was in a when people are in life-threatening situations, they might cry out to God even though they don't actually believe in God. It's just like it's like an emotional response to the emotional part of your brain. You might even cry out to your parents. You might like, mommy, like hell, because you're just so, and you're an adult, but that just might be something that happens in really traumatic situations. So but then when they think about it rationally, like rationally, it doesn't seem to make sense. So before we jump into the comparative mythology, one thing I wanted to kind of touch on was the beautiful piece of garbage, which is the Zeitgeist movie. I was a Zeitgeist watcher. I remember my mum going, "What are you listening to?" Because it has that guy's voice. In 2008, you'll be required to, carry an ID wherever you go or whatever. And I remember watching the Zeitgeist movie as a Christian and not being like, "Well, this is interesting." I wasn't fully convinced of it, but it talks a lot about comparative mythology. It's very conspiratorial. It's steel beams don't melt. If jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, 9/11 truther kind of. It was like a trailblazer in that kind of community. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you first discovered Zeitgeist, what you thought of it, and then how that led you to be more interested in comparative religion?
I remember hearing about those alleged parallels between Horus and Jesus when I was a child. So this goes way back for me, but it's not until a bit later that I actually watched it. Although I think I watched clips of it a lot earlier than that, if I remember correctly. What's interesting about it is actually these claims are very old now. They go back to a man named Gerald Massey. Gerald was the one that's responsible. He's at least the earliest person that I know of that started this nonsense, that Horus and Jesus are similar. And just so I can remember correctly when he lived, let's look it up real quick. There we go. Yeah, he lived throughout the majority of the 19th century. He died in the early 20th century, the age of 79. He died in 1907, and he pushed this ridiculous pseudo historical view that and he was like ruthlessly attacked by and understandably so by academics that were exposing him as pushing out piles of nonsense. Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize that this comes from this guy Gerald Massey, and Gerald pushed these views. It is baseless. Yeah, there's no evidence that Horus had 12 disciples. There's no evidence he was crucified. There's no evidence that he rose from the dead. The first thing that occurred to me was like, why are we talking about Horus? Why not talk about his father Osiris, who did actually die and rise again, according to the myth? So at least that has a genuine parallel in some way. Yeah. Why are we giving so much attention to Horus and nonsense about that when his father is staring right at you, right at your face? Yeah. I'm like, it's like over there he is. There's a god that actually dies and rises again, but for some reason, no, screw Osiris. We gotta focus on Horus. So I'm like, okay. Oh, and then it gets more ridiculous. Okay, they say, well, don't you see that Set sounds like Satan? So like they start making a connection. I'm like, oh, please, no, please.
Yeah, the thing that got me was the sun rays with crown of thorns. When you look up to the sun, you see like
I roll my eyes. No.
So just to give everyone some context, just quickly, the Zeitgeist movie of the early 2008 or something put out a bunch of, really popularized this notion that Jesus was probably this was the birth of the Jesus didn't exist, the popularity, I think. And one of the things they do is they call to attention the similarities between Horus and Jesus, and this is what the movie says. Horus and Jesus were both born of a virgin, both on December 25th, both heralded by a star in the east, or Sirius in brackets morning star. Three wise men for Jesus, 3 solar deities for Horus. The 12 disciples, age of baptism 30, amazing feats, walked on water, healed the sick. Horus also walked on water, healed the sick. Both died on Jesus died crucifixion on a cross. Horus died crucifixion on a tree. Post death events. So Jesus went to hell, resurrected after 35 hours, covering 3 separate days, and Horus went to hell, resurrected after 3 days, and they both resurrected. So they're both resurrected. So they were all the similarities, but most of them are huge stretches of the imagination, right?
Yeah, I'm going to share this. I decided to add this to the slides just to show the audience all the nonsense so they can see it. Here it is. I got it up. Okay, so it's not just Jesus and Horus. This is directly from the film Zeitgeist. Okay, you got lies that they're telling about Mithra, Krishna, Attis, and Dionysus. Loads of false parallels here. Nonsense that are not true. This is crap. These are false, baloney. See, so what we're supposed to believe, this is what they're driving at. That over a long period of time, or thousands of years, the same God was copied faithfully by different cultures. That's essentially what's going on here. And according to this, Horus is the oldest one, right? So I guess the other ones are supposed to be based on Horus. All the other ones, in one form or the other. Now, when we look at, like, I guess a question would be asked: is there genuine parallels at all anywhere here, even if it's not listed? Is there any? Excuse me. Is there any?
Yeah, I got one. They're all created by people. That's a huge similarity.
Wait, that works. But besides all these, is there real parallels in the mythos?
Well, I don't know. You tell me.
Right. That's the question they'll be asking. Let's look more at Dionysus. I'm more interested looking there than I am with the others. For the genuine parallels, there really aren't much or any. The other ones, Dionysus is more interesting because he is a god of wine, and Jesus turns water into wine. So in some sense, they kind of got a parallel there. I want to be very careful with that. Dionysus does appear for some kind of trial with Pentheus. Not necessarily for the same reasons that Jesus did before Pilate. It doesn't quite go the same way. Pentheus gets killed, by the way, brutally, if I remember. Yeah. He was killed. He was killed brutally. He died some kind of brutal death. Pilate obviously doesn't have that happen to him. So that, in the Gospels, that's not a parallel. And Dionysus does get torn apart, and then he gets put back together, just like Osiris does. He gets torn apart and put back together. Now Zeus came down in the form of I think it was an eagle. I don't remember correct. I don't remember. Could have been that or a different animal. But he mated with Semele. And I want to make sure that I didn't misremember that. Okay, yeah, it's Semele. Yeah. Okay. So it's not really a virgin birth. Okay, this is what Zeus did a lot in Greek mythology. That's what he did. He did that with a lot of women. He was known for that.
That's not atypical of him. Okay, so that's not really a virgin birth. It ain't a virgin birth, period. It's not. So this doesn't work. Oh, that does take me to one more thing. I've got to talk about this. I even saw somebody bring this up in the chat, and I just laugh endlessly. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. The absurd idea that Jesus sounds like Zeus. Okay, so this is a pseudo linguistics. Oh, Jesus means hail Zeus. Don't you see?
Yeah, I think I remember a little bit of this.
I'm like, no. Jesus. Okay, that's in the Septuagint, people. Okay, it's in there. We've got Greek text, Jewish text using Jesus before the New Testament. So Jesus is translating Yehoshua or Joshua into Greek. That's all it is. It has nothing. It has no relationship to Zeus. Oh, but it sounds like Zeus. I'm like, no, okay, because the Jesus, it's the Zeus part, right? That sort of rhymes. At least it sounds like Jesus or yes. It sounds like Jesus. Like, no, that doesn't count. Don't even try.
Well, were you ever convinced by the? So just with the Zeitgeist film. First of all, I bought into some of the 9/11 truth stuff at the start until I started developing critical thinking skills, and especially from watching the Atheist Experience. Actually, the Atheist Experience, I wasn't a 9/11 truther then, but the Atheist Experience, when I started watching it, it was really interesting to watch people pull apart arguments and explain what fallacy was and everything like that. But oh, so good, so helpful. But so did you ever buy into any of the claims of the Zeitgeist film, or were you smart enough to think, no, these are silly? And then did you ever become a Jesus mythicist?
Interesting questions. I'll say when I heard about it, I kind of looked the other way for a bit. And then I decided, you know what, I need to look into this. Because I'm like, I wasn't sure if there's any truth to it. I keep being told these things are true. So at some point, I'm like, I want a source. Nobody could give it to me. I'm like, okay, we got a problem. Somebody made some stuff up. Okay, somebody made, and the somebody was Gerald Massey. Okay. That's the somebody who made it up. So that idiot made that stuff up. And Horus is not born of a virgin. Like, some people say, oh, yes, he was. I'm like, okay. All right, so here's the deal. When Isis put Osiris back together after Set killed him and then threw his body parts everywhere and just dispersed his body parts, Isis put Osiris back together, but she couldn't find his phallus. So she decided to create an artificial phallus. So sorry to burst your bubble, anyone that believes that Horus is Jesus, but Osiris and Isis had sex. Okay. And so that doesn't make Isis a virgin. He used an artificial phallus to carry it out, and it was done. That's it. That's not a virgin. Come on. Yeah.
So, was this what spurred your interest into comparative mythology, or looking at because you're really interested now in Egyptian and Mesopotamian belief systems and religions? Is this what spurred your interest in that, or were you already interested in that kind of stuff?
I think I was already interested in it. I'm also interested in the ancient European religions as well. And
the Proto-Indo-European stuff. So I'm very interested in the research done and all that, and there are some. I mean, there are genuine parallels between Egyptian myth and the Bible. Like,
yeah, the Israelites were living in millions were living in Egypt, right? At the under Pharaoh, before they escaped back to Egypt. So, like, of course they would have no, but yeah, that was my next question: is are there any genuine parallels? I know that you're friends with Derek from Myth Vision, and huge at the moment. For the last year or so has been Gnostic Conformant Neil and Derek from Myth Vision, proposing ideas that they've read or they've studied and found themselves about parallels between Greek myths and other myths and the ideas that we see in the Bible. Have you found any? Are you in disagreement anywhere with those guys? Do you agree with some things, not others? Have you found your own parallels?
And so what I will say is that, let's take for instance, and I did a couple episodes with Gary Greenberg on this, the Egyptian parallels to the Bible, and he outlined several parallels. Like, one of the Egyptian gods actually speaks, and by speaking he creates. Just by speaking. And so this is similar to what we see in the book of Genesis when God speaks, and when he speaks, it happens. So by the power of his words, things get created, and we see that, and we do see that in the Egyptian religion. So I'm more interested in looking at the Egyptian parallels with the Hebrew Bible rather than the New Testament. That's because to me there's more of a connection there, and trying to make that work with the New Testament, I think, has got problems. But understanding that the Egyptian religion influenced the Hebrew Bible, the Canaanite religion influenced the Hebrew Bible, other Mesopotamian religions influencing the Hebrew Bible as well, makes better sense. So all of them are influencing the Hebrew Bible in their own ways.
So, what are some of those parallels?
Yeah, so if we look at the Mesopotamian religion, they have their own flood myth, for instance, like in the Epic of Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you got Atrahasis being warned by one god that there's a flood coming, because another one's going to start it. And so he builds a boat, gets people on there, animals, just like with Noah. Now, what's interesting is in Egypt, we don't have an equivalent to a flood myth like that in Egypt, at least not exactly. What they've got is a god called Nu. And what Nu does is he carries a boat and raises it over the waters, and the gods are on the boat. So you could try to link that with the biblical flood myth, but I think it's more obvious that the Mesopotamian one fits better, because you've got somebody building a boat to ride out the flood. People are boarding it. Animals are boarding it. One god warned him. No one's starting it. So it makes better sense that the book of Genesis is being primarily inspired from Mesopotamian flood myth here. More similar. And when you look at the Greek one, for instance, the Greek religion, you got Deucalion's flood. So Deucalion, what he does is he and Pyrrha, his wife,
They go inside a box and they ride out the flood. A box. Okay. Now, yeah, he's warned by Prometheus the flood is coming. Zeus is the one starting the flood. But the Greek one's very different. You can see the differences. It doesn't copy the Mesopotamian faithfully. It's left some details out, changed some of it. So the Mesopotamian one parallels the biblical version better, is my point. And that actually is an issue I have with those that try to date the Hebrew Bible later, because some are attempting to date the Hebrew Bible way later in the first millennium BC. They'll date it to the 3rd century BC. I think that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not convinced of that. And it parallels, again, as I said a moment ago, it parallels the Mesopotamian one better. Anybody can look that up and find out for themselves.
So sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what do apologists say to these parallels that you've discovered?
Well, I mean, just so we're clear, it's not like I.
Oh, not that you discovered, but like, what have you discovered that apologists have said?
Oh, yes. Okay. Some will say something that's very absurd. I think that might go back to Justin Martyr, who said something ridiculous like this, if I remember correctly. Anyway, some will say, well, this is all part of Satan's grand deception, don't you see? He knew that Jesus was coming. Oh, okay. So
yeah,
he created all these.
Yeah, he also put all the fossils in the ground.
So he created all these fake religions in advance to deceive everybody before the truth came out. That's essentially what they're saying. I'm like, come on.
Oh God, I love that so much.
It's really funny. I'm like, this is okay. That's some massive desperation. One.
Yeah, every other god is silly, made up nonsense, but not your god. Your god is real,
right?
And not silly at all. So this is So I guess we're coming up to the end of the conversation now, but I wanted to bring something up that was just totally random that I kind of discovered. So when I was looking up the verses that you sent me, and when we went through, I was looking up the word father in the Bible. I think I was looking up the word father, and I come across the verses of honor your father and honor your mother and your father. And I realized something. I'm not sure if I think I've been told this, and I'm just re-remembering it. So it's not an original idea, but you know how in Ephesians 6:23, let me just quickly turn here. It says Ephesians 6, much quicker than the New Testament. As I say that. 6:2-3. Sorry.
No problem.
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it will go well with you and that you will enjoy long life on the earth. Okay? So what do you make of that verse? Obey your mother and father. It's the first commandment with a promise that it will go well with you and that you will enjoy a long life on the earth.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I think one can say that in some sense makes sense, because I'm like, okay, listening to your parents. Well, obviously. But on the other hand, it's like it's twisting it by incorporating the God, the fear of God into it. So it's linked with that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, if you obey your parents, you see, you'll have a long life on the earth. So in other words, it's like an analogy of, well, obeying God leads to that too. That's the general idea.
Well, I have an idea, and I even asked ChatGPT, and it didn't pick this up. And so I tried to convince it that I was right. But anyway, tell me what everyone thinks. And this isn't my idea. I heard it somewhere, but I just remembered it. It's the first commandment with a promise that you'll live a long life. Okay. Remember back in Deuteronomy 21:18, if someone has a stubborn or rebellious son who does not obey his father or mother and will not listen to them, and they will to them when they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of his town. They shall say to the elders, "This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Then all the men of the town are to stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. So this is, I believe, commandments directly from God. This isn't a Moses thing. It's in, I think this is from God. But anyway, it's there in the Old Testament. What this is saying is you won't be, what I think this is saying is you're not going to be stoned to death if you honor your mother and father. Like if you're a rebellious and stubborn son, you might be stoned to death. So what the New Testament is doing is it's reworking it and saying, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. So it's putting a positive spin on it. If you do that, you won't be stoned to death. And I was like, that is such a more sinister twist if you look at it like that. Do you see that? Or do you think I'm stretching?
Actually, I think you have a good point.
That's weird, right?
I have to admit that did not occur to me. And actually, now that I think about it, I think that is a better reading.
It's because I read it like how you read it when I was a Christian. Oh yeah, like honor your father and mother. Yeah, it's good. Like, but it's like, why does it say commandment with a promise? And I was like, interesting. I want to look at, is that the first commandment with a promise? Dan McClellan, you need to do a little like, one of your short videos on this, because is that the first commandment with a promise? I'd really like to know more about this. This is super interesting.
Yeah, I think that needs to be looked into some more. And this isn't. Go ahead.
Oh no, say what you're saying.
Now, I mean, Ephesians is a disputed letter. There are some that are going to claim it's fake, but there are others that believe it's authentic. But
okay.
But Philemon, in the letter to the Philemon, slavery appears to be, well, not just appears to be, literally is being condoned by Paul, because of giving his slave Onesimus to Philemon, something like that.
He asks him not to be. He asks him to accept him no longer as a slave, but a brother in Christ, which is
right.
The verse they use to say, "Look, all the slavery is bad now," and but I don't think that's what it's saying.
Yeah. So Paul has no problem engaging in horrific, immoral acts, or doing morally questionable things, or engaging in morally questionable things. So if one were to go with he wrote Ephesians, then it's not. I don't think it should be so surprising that he would insinuate, or more than insinuate, that a child that disobeys his or her parents could be executed, as you were just talking about. So and Paul persecuted the followers of Jesus before his conversion, apparent conversion, and he killed people, arrested people, or whatever. He did horrible things. So it's in his character. It's in his character.
Yeah, Paul was a was a pretty weird dude. I think if we didn't have Paul, we might not have Christianity as we know it today.
Oh yeah.
It's very interesting guy. Before we get to the super chats, and Vishanti, I've seen your super chat, and I'll read it out. I just want to quickly shout out the Deep Drinks patrons. So thank you to all the supporters, and especially thank you to Jason Rollins, Matthew Monga, Digital Hammurabi, and Skeptics and Scoundrel Eric. These are the archbishops of the archbishops of Deep Drinks. Oh, it's been a couple of weeks. I'm rusty, but thank you guys for supporting this channel. I really do appreciate it. And of course, Jacob's channel. Let me just quickly share the screen. Do you have anything coming up, or what should people go watch if they haven't seen your channel before? Actually, I know what they should watch. They should go watch the episode with me as well, which is, where is it? It's somewhere.
It's in the live.
Live, yes.
Live
so your channel is just filled with like good stuff, and also hi to everyone that's watching from over on History Valley. Yeah,
there it is. Leaving Christianity.
Here it is. Yeah, go watch this episode. It's a really cool episode. You hear more about my my journey and my experiences, and I'm the one being interviewed there. But do you have any other episodes that you think people should go check out if they're interested in what they saw today?
Well, I think they'll find the videos I did with Gary Greenberg to be good. Jesus Before the Gospels of Bart Ehrman is also a very good one too. And also Dan McClellan and the video Yahweh and El, the two gods of Israel, of ancient Israel. Yeah, that's also a really good one that I'd recommend.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We got a couple of super chats and questions. One of the super chats is from Vishanti. Does Jacob think thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Does Jacob think Alexander Bislop's the Two Babylons is better or worse than Macy's? Or Massey's. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, I cannot comment because I haven't read it.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Vishanti, is it a good book? What are your thoughts? I want to hear your thoughts, really. Maybe ducked out, but thank you so much for the James Bong. Great show and great combo. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming out. It's been a great conversation, and we want to keep it under 90 minutes today. And it's been good to be back. And next week we have Dr. Kip Davis doing his second part of the episode we did a few weeks ago, and which is part of his course of True Israelite Religions, the early Israelite religions. So that'll be really good. So thanks for checking this out, guys. And actually, one last question. Jacob, and I haven't done this in a while, but I will ask it as we're closing out. This used to be a standard on Deep Drinks. I've done, we've got 100 and something episodes now, and I haven't done it for a while. What is the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in?
What is the most plausible religion that I do not believe in?
Yeah. Plausibly true. So if you had to, another way to think of it is if a magic genie popped into existence and said, one of the world religions is true, good luck, and then just popped out of existence, and you just had to guess which one is the most likely to be true, which one would you guess?
I don't even know if I could answer it. I don't know which one I'd pick.
I can tell you most people pick Buddhism. And which I feel like is slippery because a lot of them are atheists and they just know that Buddhism doesn't have a god in a lot of its belief systems. But I'm a fan of the Hare Krishnas. I think are pretty cool. Like they're pretty peaceful as a religion. I don't know if I'd want to do everything they do, but they seem nice. Yeah. Do you have any that if you could choose to be true, you would any afterlife that you could choose to be true? Would you choose which religion's afterlife would you choose?
It's not something I thought of either. That would take some thought.
You seem like a really like you think about things before you answer them, which I really respect. So that's good. All right. Yeah. Well, next time Jacob's on, he'll have time to think about that, and we can answer that. But see you all guys later, and see you next time. Bye.
Yep. Thank you.